A majority of Americans disagree with Trump's continued escalation in Iran, and the United States didn't even strike Iran because Americans were at danger. What if I told you that the United States didn't strike Iran because Americans were under imminent threat, but because another country was already planning a strike and demanded that the United States helped? That is exactly what Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, just admitted openly. And it has powerful implications for US foreign policy, domestic politics, and America's role in the world. We're unpacking why that matters, how it's fracturing both parties, from MAGA loyalists to progressive Democrats, and why much of the global South sees this as blatant imperialism. In a briefing, Marco Rubio said that preemptive strikes that the United States put on Iran were triggered by Israel's plan to attack Iranian targets because Washington believed Tehran would then retaliate against US forces, and that would endanger Americans. The White House justification: act first to save lives. Israel's determination to attack Iran and the certainty that US troops would be targeted in response forced the Trump administration to take preemptive strikes, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, and a new explanation for Washington's surprise entry into this conflict. The rationale drew divided reviews from top members of Congress, who on Monday evening received the first briefing by the Trump administration since it ordered the air campaign to begin over the weekend. Rubio, the CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Dan Kane spoke to lawmakers behind closed doors in the Capitol ahead of an expected vote this week in the House of Representatives on a war powers resolution that presents an unlikely opportunity to force Trump to end hostilities in Iran. It is abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States, Rubio told reporters at the Capitol. We knew that there was going to be Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer a higher casualty. Mark Warner, the Democratic vice chair of Senate Intelligence Committee, said he was worried for the implications of the US allowing Israel to essentially force it into a new war. There was no imminent threat to the United States of America by the Iranians. There was a threat to Israel. If we equate a threat to Israel as the equivalent of an imminent threat to the United States, then we are in uncharted territory, Warner said. The striking point here, both literally and figuratively, is there is explicit admission that the US action was tied to Israel's timeline, not a direct Iranian threat against the United States. That's not speculation or rumor. These are executive branch members that are on record saying that we did this because of Israel. Rubio's official remarks to the press reiterate that the US knew that an Israeli operation was coming and that Iran would respond. And this justified US action in the mind of these US executive officials. According to the State Department transcript, Rubio has stood by the administration's logic that preemptive strikes were necessary to reduce casualties and neutralize forces. Rubio was then asked directly by a member of the press, do you anticipate putting boots on the ground, and how long do you anticipate the conflict to last? Rubio responded, well, we don't. Let me say two things about it. Number one, the president always has the options to undertake whatever operations he decides to do as commander in chief. That said, we believe the objective that we have set for the mission, which is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities, both launch capability and manufacturing, can be achieved without ground forces. Right now, we're not postured for ground forces, but obviously the president has those options. He's never going to rule out anything. But right now, our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile launchers, their ballistic missile stockpiles, and their ballistic missile manufacturing capability, as well as their one-way attack drones and their Navy because of the threat it poses to global shipping. That should tell you everything that you need to know about what this administration is willing to do, even going as far as putting American troops' lives at risks simply for an Israeli strike. We are making foreign policy decisions and threatening the lives of American troops over Israel's strategic thinking. Also important to note that the administration did not secure a formal congressional authorization before bombing Iran, even though the Constitution reserves war powers specifically to Congress. In Article 1 of the Constitution, it says that the legislative branch is supposed to be the most powerful, which is Congress. And part of those responsibilities that the legislative branch has is declaring when we go to war, not just unilaterally decided by a president, because we kind of like had a whole revolution against that type of mentality. We don't like kings here in the United States. The fallout of this conflict is not limited to international geopolitics. It's also hurting us domestically, and both major political parties are in unfamiliar, uneasy territory. Polls from before the conflict already showed deep internal divisions within both Democrats and Republicans over U.S. foreign policy regarding Israel, military aid, and the Middle East strategy. According to a Global Affairs public survey, liberal Democrats overwhelmingly think that the United States gives Israel too much support. The fallout of this conflict is also not limited to international geopolitics. It's also hurting us domestically, and both major political parties are in unfamiliar and uneasy territory. Polls from before the conflict already showed deep internal divisions within both Democrats and Republicans over U.S. policy toward Israel, military aid, and Middle East strategy. According to a Global Affairs public opinion survey, liberal Democrats overwhelmingly think the United States gives Israel too much support, about 70% of Democrats, while moderate Democrats are even more split. And even within the GOP, MAGA and non MAGA conservatives differ on how much backing the United States should provide to Israel. This is the poll that shows overall 20% of Republicans think that too much aid is going to Israel, with a stronger percentage among those that are non MAGA, 26%. Earlier reporting from Newsline magazine highlighted a trend within the conservative movement, what it calls MAGA Zionism, where pro Israel alignment became part of the broader America First coalition. Some MAGA influencers and America First conservatives, though, are pushing back, arguing that Washington's foreign policy is too beholden to Israel's strategic operations and that the United States shouldn't go to war on behalf of another country. That is completely antithetical to an America First mentality, is doing the bidding of another country by going to war. Long seen as unwavering in their support for Israel, even if for self-serving reasons, American Christians' attitudes are shifting in different directions based on varying premises. It appears that this dynamic is also hitting at something deeper, however. American Christians across the spectrum are soul seeking within their own belief systems as the culling of a people at their expense is laid bare in real time. This diverse public is wrestling, like Jacob, with its own kind of inner strife, the complexities of the country's national interests, generational divides, socio-cultural identities, political alliances, religious beliefs, and the respective value placed on each of them. Many have moved toward deeper questioning of Israeli expansion, empathy for Palestinians, and action towards lasting change in U.S. policy. Others are using these attitudinal shifts as an opportunity to incite more animosity. As Trump assumes the presidency once again, he may soon be deep in our reckoning over U.S. policy on Israel from the corner least expected, his own. This isn't fringe anymore. It's influencing Republican political dynamics and how MAGA defines itself. And this isn't just a discussion happening in Washington. Across the global South, leaders and analysts are condemning the U.S. Israeli actions in Iran as illegal, imperialist, and unilateral aggression, particularly because the strikes lacked UN Security Council approval and were launched without any congressional authorization. Countries like Brazil, South America, Pakistan, Indonesia, and others have called the conflict illegitimate and criticized it as a blatant exercise of military dominance. In their view, this isn't about self-defense of the United States. It is about power projection. And while billion-dollar military operations dominate the headlines, everyday Americans are dealing with a very different reality. Skyrocketing rent costs, lack of access to healthcare and childcare, veterans struggling for care, wages lagging behind inflation. At the same time, Rubio has acknowledged that energy prices are likely to spike as a result of this conflict, something that hits Americans in their wallet, especially those that are working class. The contrast here is very stark. For many Americans, this war is too expensive, it is not necessary, and it is all because of Israel's strategic thinking. For allied governments, it feels like it's whatever it takes for Donald Trump to feel like he's doing something about this conflict. That is potent political messaging, and it's fueling dissatisfaction on both the left and the right. This war is not simply about Iran, it's not about Israel's security, it's about who decides what America does and when it goes to war. Rubio's own admission, the Secretary of State, exposes a deeper truth. The U.S. foreign policy is no longer insulated from domestic politics, global opinion, or ideological fractures. And maybe that's a good thing, because Americans are finally asking questions about who are we beholden to? Whose interests are actually at the center of our foreign policy decision making? Another nation's national security can't automatically trigger us into another war. We can't just launch wars without congressional approval with a monarch-like authority given by the president. Americans cannot continue to absorb the costs of foreign death while they can't even afford to provide for themselves here at home. We need to ask, whose country is this really? Decisions are no longer grounded in sovereign American interests and democratic accountability. This is not a debate about Iran. This is a debate about the future of American democracy itself. And that conversation is just getting started.